Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the School District 72 Board of Education held at Timberline Secondary School this 29th day of September 2020. The board acknowledges that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Lakota people. Attending tonight's meeting at the table, we have Vice Chair John Kerr and Trustees Daryl Hagan, Joyce McMahon, Susan Wilson, Kat Eddy virtually, and Shannon Briggs. We also have our Superintendent, Dr. Jerry Morrow, Associate Superintendents Bill Sismic and Martin Kyle, and our Secretary and Treasurer Kevin Patrick. And supporting us, we also have Barb Craig, Natalie Crawshaw, and Jennifer Patrick. At today's meeting, did I miss anybody? Nope. No. At today's meeting, we will hear a number of presentations. Presenters are reminded to please keep your presentations to 10 minutes or less. We thank you for providing supporting documents before the meeting. The board will listen respectfully to your presentation. After the presentation, the members of the Board of Education may ask questions of the presenters. Please be aware that it is unlikely that the board will immediately respond to your presentation. Generally, it is a good thing for the board to take the time to think carefully about what it has heard before making a decision. And there may be other information or perspectives to be considered before making a formal response. Tonight we shall also hear from our auditors. The season of politics is on us. Provincial election has been called, and there has been a new speech from the throne from our federal government. Promises made by the federal government include ideas about the provision of child care. And our presentation from Andrea Craddock, President of the QP here in Campbell School District, is about child care. Our provincial government is offering grants for construction, but no funds to support their day-to-day operation. So these are complicated and interesting times as we navigate the COVID-19 world of today and plan for the post-COVID-19 world. I believe that on this topic we have a lot of work to do. There's going to be a lot of discussion, and that we will be busy with this as we move forward. And at this meeting, we will also hear from the president of the CRDTA, Campbell River District Teachers Association, Dave Parker. The administration of the district will also provide us with a plan for the expenditure of the federal grant related to COVID-19. It is important to note that these monies are a one-time grant that has been given to the school district to manage. These funds are in the control of the administration and are subject to board oversight. However, our current governance model does not provide for line-by-line decision-making of operational budgets. I should also bring forward a tabled motion to spend $250,000 of the federal grant on outdoor education. We have many options with regard to this motion. As I will not be taking part in discussions in this motion, I would like to say during my comments that I believe that outdoor education is important, especially in our community. Ideally, I think we need to form a committee or group to drill down and create a shared vision for how our students can learn from nature and become stewards of a healthy, sustainable environment. It is at this point, when there is a shared vision and specific goals, it will be an appropriate time to ascertain budgetary considerations. Today, I will introduce a notice of motion to amend board policies related to the annual election of the chair and vice chair. And our last municipal election was in October, therefore I'm proposing changes to policy that will see the chair and take place in November rather than December. As I promised back in 2018, I will not stand for re-election for chair or vice chair. because I believe it is good in terms of succession planning and for the development of trustee skills to rotate positions. I sincerely thank the board for your support over the past 2 years. This board is a highly effective team, and I have benefited from the wisdom and efforts of each and every trustee and district administrator on this board. I will also bring forward a motion to examine the costs and benefits of the board's membership in the British Columbia School Trustees Association and Vancouver Island School Trustees Association. A review of this expenditure is prudent, as it is taxpayers' money that is being expended on these memberships. And finally, as a former teacher and school principal during the pre-COVID era, I was often the recipient and regrettably the transmitter of colds and flus, head lice and whatever for 35 years. Parents sent their kids to school, their sick kids to school, and I often soldiered on even when I was very ill. Strangely, it was like a badge of honor 10 years ago to retire with over 300 bank days. That was the past. And if there's a silver lining to COVID-19, I think it will be the idea that coming to work or school when one is sick is not socially responsible. Parents can really help us keep kids safe by not sending sick children to school. That fever or cough may be just a cold, but it could be COVID-19, it could be influenza, you just don't know. So please, if a student or staff member is sick, please stay home. And I'll turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Jeremy Morrow for his comments.
Thank you very much, Chair Franklin. I appreciate your comments tonight. Just wanted to mention that as a district, we've had the opportunity since the start of the pandemic to work closely with our Regional Public Health Officer, Dr. Charmaine Ems. Whether it has been me seeking clarification or sharing a concern or her contacting me proactively, I have found her to be calm, clear, and reassuring. Now, Dr. Ems was gracious enough to participate in the town hall last week, where staff were able to ask any question or express any concern. And after this town hall, I had a number of employees express to me their appreciation for her time and her willingness to participate in that town hall. And I wanted to take this chance to publicly express my gratitude to her for her willingness and for her ongoing dedication in supporting our district and community. I want to thank the many staff who over the past few days have, in spite of all of the challenges of COVID, arranged for safe ways to conduct Terry Fox runs, and to our families who have helped support fundraising for such a noble cause. I wanted to mention as well that tomorrow is Orange Shirt Day. I'm going to read just a couple of sentences from the National Film Board about the purpose of that day. Orange Shirt Day was launched in 2013 to call attention to 165 years of residential school experiences from 1831 to 1996. For residential school survivor Phyllis Webstad, the severing of the threads that connected her to family, community, and culture began in 1973 when the beautiful orange shirt she wore to her first day of school was stripped from her and never seen again. Orange Shirt Day is intended to raise awareness and acknowledge the harms of the past, and this day can spark initiatives to weave reconciliation into education throughout the year. I know that there are a wide range of plans in schools tomorrow in acknowledgement of Orange Shirt Day, and wanted to take a moment just to remember that the stories of the people who experience residential schools is an important step in our ongoing commitment to truth and reconciliation. Tonight there will be two presentations to the board. Dave Harper, President of the CRDTA, and Andrea Craddock, President of Local QP 723. With them both here to present tonight, I wanted to recognize the incredible amount of work that they have both engaged in since the onset of this pandemic. The leadership work that they do on behalf of their members is complex, challenging, and important. both perform a critical leadership role in our district. Last week was National Payroll Week, and we celebrated the amazing payroll talent that we have in our district. We have a dedicated group of employees who have responded brilliantly to the challenges of COVID-19, as well as the ongoing challenges of a rapidly changing world of work. They perform a critical function, and they do it with expertise and grace. And I wanted to thank our payroll team, although I am subconsciously grateful twice a month for their work, but so grateful that they are part of our team, and they perform, again, so many in an organization, they're unsung heroes that don't often get recognized. I think it's important to do so. And lastly, I just wanted to take this last chance just to thank our community. So we understand that what is happening in our community will be directly reflected in our schools. And because we do not have community transmission in our school, or in our community, we do not and have not yet had an incident of COVID in one of our schools. And so that I ask that the community continues your effort to, which is helpful in keeping our students and staff as safe as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. So I have a motion that the minutes of the meeting of September 8th, 2020 are hereby approved as circulated. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved, John Kerr, and seconded, Darrell Hagan. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Are there any additions or alterations to the agenda? Darrell?
Yes, I'd like to, I hope that's going to look at number 10F, and it's with regards to student input to board decisions. It was something you talked to me about quite a while ago when I started with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Alteration.
Yes.
11B, we just we'll fold that into 11A.
Okay. I'll accept those as amendments. The motion is that the agenda is hereby approved as amended. Mover and seconder, please. Mr. Hagan, Mr. Briggs. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Now we move on to the report of the board's decisions from September 29th, 2020. Trustee Kerr.
Meeting started at 6:30. We discussed matters of land, legal issues, and personnel, and we finished 2 minutes past the allocated time, and we are finished for the evening.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce the board to someone we all know, Andrew Craddock, who is the president of Canadian Union of Public Employees Local 723 here in Campbell River. Welcome to our meeting, Andrea.
Great. So thank you very much for having me at your meeting this evening to present on building seamless childcare. Again, my name is Andrea Craddock. I'm the president of QP 723 support staff in School District 72. And something you may not know about me is before I became an educational assistant minister for the district, I ran a family daycare for almost 8 years. I live about a block and a half from Ocean Road School. It was really convenient for parents to drop their kids off with me, and at that time, of course, we had morning and afternoon kindergarten, so I was able to do pickups, drop-offs in the school. Often I would take my crew with me up to the playground, and parents would meet me there. So I am very passionate about this subject. While I was doing daycare, I was always full. I always had a wait list. and two of my friends that live in the neighborhood have continued that on, and it hasn't changed. They are constantly full, constantly having with us. So, yeah, so this is why I'm talking to you today about building childcare. So too many families lack childcare services where and when they need it. The market-based childcare system doesn't work due to inadequate supply of spaces and unfair distribution of services. Even with recent investments, BC has only enough space for 20% of children. Quality childcare remains out of reach for many families due to high fees and long wait lists. And of course, during this pandemic that we are experiencing globally, it has become even more important as far as providing spaces for kids while their parents are trying to go to work, wanting to reduce the number of contacts that children are having in contact with, and yeah, so without accessible or quality childcare in place, parents called back to work won't necessarily be able to return to work. Integration of public childcare delivery within our existing school system best meets BC's childcare needs and recommends the seamless day model for that integration. The system would create many school-age childcare spaces within a very short time period and with limited public investment as compared to other models. Affordability of the seamless day model in no way compromises quality in that it is, in fact, a highly regarded design for early learning care. Investments in public childcare bring with them the creation of stable, good-paying jobs in the childcare sector that can themselves aid in our economic recovery. Along with that, we have been experiencing some retention and recruitment challenges with our educational systems. And part of that has been due to it not being a full-time job. So that many of our EAs currently hold 2 and sometimes 3 jobs. So I think that by increasing their day and offering them more hours of work, that it will become a more sought after job. Integration into the school system is a better model for kids and families. The seamless day model integrates early learning for school-age children and childcare with the school day. Thousands of potential, cost-effective spaces for before and after school care exist in every region of BC. This would increase available childcare while delivering a very high-quality, value-added system of early childhood education that works in tandem with the school. Potentially, this will free up spaces in our existing daycares in the community for preschool-age children and full-day care. Recent changes to the School Act mean that school districts can begin implementing these models. Benefits of the seamless day: improved accessibility and fewer transitions for kids, fewer contacts with adults, which addresses COVID protocols and concerns, enhanced and informed care that is education focused, coordination of care and learning between before and after school and school day program, more secure and reliable childcare options in our community, new opportunities to recruit and retain high quality education assistants and early childhood educators, more effective delivery of cost effective, high quality childcare spaces, and increased investment in our public school system. The structure of the seamless day looks something like this, and I mean, obviously, this is a model that has been put out there, but there's certainly ways that it could be tweaked as we move along. Children arrive at their local public school for before school care. The classroom teacher joins the ECE, and the students go to school day. The ECE remains in the classroom, providing care and educational leadership in partnership with the teacher. The second ECE joins the class just before lunch, allowing for overlap and preparation time. The morning ECE concludes their day during the lunch break. The second ECE stays with the students and delivers the after-school care program. Examples of the seamless. Norway is a world leader in early learning and care, and schools are required to provide before and after school care as part of a universal system. The use of the model is increasing in Canada, and a great example is the widespread use of the seamless day in Waterloo, Ontario school system. A pilot project began in School District 53, Okanagan-Sanokanee in 2019, and early results show that it surpasses expectations. The research and global examples are very positive, and the argument for this model is incredibly strong. Back in 2016, our school board was part of creating the Children's Charter, and if you look at what that charter upholds, it's around creating health and community and safe spaces, love and attention, as well as school and early learning. So I think this ties in to that charter, as well as our strategic plans for our schools. Priority 1, about improving student achievement with goals around literacy and numeracy. Certainly there's opportunities in before and after school care to continue working on those in lots of innovative ways with skilled ECE and educational assistants. Priority 2 is building a culture of learning wellness. I think by providing a service that families are looking for, that need in our community, it's going to alleviate stress for families. It's going to provide a much easier and seamless day for children. They're not going to be moving around as much because they will have to be taken somewhere else for their childcare before or after school. So I think it also is on this priority as well. And priority 3, honoring Indigenous worldviews and perspectives. We have a number of very talented Indigenous educational assistants, as well as care workers that come with a variety of backgrounds, knowledge, culture, language, and as well as I feel that our district has done a really wonderful job of making sure that this is happening, so I believe all educational assistants have a pretty good understanding and are certainly cognitive in making sure that this is happening. So next steps. Commit recent federal funding toward launching limited entry before and after school care programs in all Campbell River elementary schools. Apply for the government grants to secure more long-term funding. Survey education assistants for those with ECE certification and/or experience. Consult with strong start facilitators. Consult with NIC or distance learning, and potentially offering bridging ECE training for educational assistants. Meet with teachers and educational assistants to explore the seamless childcare model and how it can best convert. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Just based on that last slide, where is the closest ECE training if North Island College does not currently offer bridging?
So this would be different. It would be a modified model. It wouldn't be full ECE certification. It would be a bridging. Joyce, did you want to talk about?
Sorry. Yeah, you might be surprised to hear I have lots to say, but ECE courses are now offered in a variety of delivery models through North Island College. There's part-time, there is part-time diploma, which is above and beyond your basic ECE, being offered throughout the North Island, Port Alberni, and there's also the full-time 10-hour course that historically was offered out of the campus in Courtney. So they're all written. They have received quite a bit of increased funding because of the initiative to try and meet the demands of increased positions for ECE people that are not currently being filled. So there's lots of options there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when they did a national survey, 1 in 5 educational assistants actually had some ECE training if they weren't actually certified. So there's quite a significant number that do have ECE backgrounds. So
yeah, I'm aware of that because they often leave the nonprofit sector to go into the school district because you offer benefits and a much better wage than we're able to offer in the nonprofit sector. But I just wanted to speak to this briefly because, or maybe not so briefly, because coincidentally, you were having a discussion about the Little Point Center previous to this, and when I was involved with the school district 26 years ago, and the provincial government gave us funds in order that we could create a space on school grounds that would offer a space that would be out of school, but very close to school. You can still run back and get your shoes when you forgot them, but it was a distinct space, unique from the school environment. I thought we had hit on a trend. I thought this is it. We've got our first on-school childcare facility that can offer early learning programs outside of the time when kids are in school. We have a family resource program here. We have Strong Start here. This is the model that is going to take off. And now we're 26 years later, and I think we do have some private operators who are operating on school grounds, but it didn't take off. I think there is a move within both our federal and provincial government to try and create some momentum around having it move forward. But having been pushing it for about 50 years now, I'm waiting to see. I would also like to say that many of the board here will know, but maybe some of our administrators won't, that some years ago, this board did support the community plan for an integrated program of early learning and care. So we have signed on to the $10 a day childcare plan some years ago. So I think we're in a good position. I just think, like most things, it comes down to dollars.
yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, Lois. That ultimately, the push is to move childcare into education, move it into the ministry, and have it become publicly funded, which makes so much sense. And we all know that the first 5 years are critical to a child's learning and the rest of their lives. Why isn't it part of the school system? So it's just a matter of getting everybody on board and creating a system that works and absolutely support, like we say, the $10 a day childcare program. It's interesting, I was talking to a young mom recently that lived back east, and they did have childcare, and she said she cannot believe that BC is so far behind many other provinces. The fact that so many families are struggling, and it actually makes a difference for a lot of families, even staying in BC. They're leaving because we don't have that childcare program.
I also would like to bring attention to the report that came out in January. I think, John, you were at the presentation of this. It was funded through the UBCM in partnership with the city, the school district, and the Campbell Child Care Society. And they did a pretty thorough review of what the needs for childcare in Campbell River were, and set some 2 to 3 year targets. The target for school-age children was that we need a minimum of 200 to 300 new spaces in the next 2 to 3 years. In order to meet the threshold of about 35% of the children from 5 to 12 years old, we would need 1,500 school age spaces available. So I think the need has been described very adequately.
I recognize the need. I recognize the value of what you're proposing here. My concern is that what we're trying to build here, what we'd like to build here, is going to have to be held together with chewing gum and spit. It's, we're talking about accessing, you were mentioning accessing a one-time grant from the federal government, COVID money. We're talking about, one-time funding, not so much a grant, I guess, but an infusion of cash of some sort. You're talking about grants. And until the provincial government makes it a priority and funds it as part of a system, basically trying to do the job that with the resources that we have for it is well nigh impossible. As laudable as it is, but to be relying on a one-time infusion of cash from the federal government because of COVID-19, I'm sure that there are other demands for that money in different sectors, and also to rely on the provincial government for grants instead of consistent, thematic, sustainable, and predictable funding is my mantra. I think that this is the present day circumstances is a really good time for people to be advocating for this with our local candidates and also for our provincial parties. So where do you stand on, what is your commitment to funding, seamless day or affordable daycare, not funding 20% of the kids in the province. I mean, my grandson goes to a daycare in Fort St. John, $900 a month. And my granddaughter goes to me another $900. So my son and daughter-in-law are paying almost $2,000 a month, and they are lucky to have a place. They were very lucky because they've got friends who were trying to get into the same daycare and didn't make it. And that has a real impact, as you say, it has a real impact on their employment. But it comes down to the fact that if we want to have a system like this, there has to be the political will to fund it adequately. And until that happens, we're going to end up having a patchwork of different attempts to make something work. And I think it's well nigh impossible under those circumstances.
So I hear your concern, John. However, I think sort of the idea in the interim until we do have a government that is going to do exactly what you're saying and start funding it properly. If we were to be offering this at market value rates as to what nonprofits are charging outside, that there are ways for it to be funded through fees. I mean, parents are going to have to pay it no matter where they're going. So I'm not suggesting that the school district absorb that cost.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying for $10 a day daycare, there has to be adequate funding from the province or the federal government. I don't know whose jurisdiction it is, and not where the ministry says to the school district 72, here's your budget for the year. Oh, by the way, you now have to take on, a seamless day. I'm not, I'm in favor of that. I see the difficulties that my son and his wife have providing daycare for my grandson. It's absolutely necessary, but it has to be funded adequately. Where that money comes from, I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade.
Well, the lovely thing about it being a seamless childcare program is that we do have the existing infrastructure, we have the existing staff. So some of those things are part of the cost of doing school, period. So it's not like it's necessarily additional costs. Where you're going to see additional costs, of course, is in the staff that are working to provide those programs. But I think, you know, absolutely the goal is to get to $10 a day childcare and to expand it to pre-K childcare as well. But in the interim, it would be something where the district would be charging fees to parents.
If I may just say something, that I think that every one of the trustees around the table recognizes the fact that we need affordable childcare in Campbell River, especially in many of the areas. And to get there, we need people who keep their promises in government. I've heard promises from the federal government, and it doesn't matter which government, and it doesn't matter which provincial government. But if we can look somebody in the eye and they're willing to say, I am going to come up with a solution, I'm all in. That's just the way this board, I believe I can speak for most of the board on this, is that we are all in to want the best for young kids coming into our classrooms, who are well prepared, who are looked after, taken care of, and they're seamless, and parents who can go out and work, especially in this COVID time now. And that is our commitment to say, I'm going to be pushing whoever's going to run locally here and asking them, where do you stand on these issues? Because these are critical. And these are the places where we have to go. And you know, Joyce, I admire you for all the years you've been pushing us for early childcare and early education. It is essential. It wasn't within our mandate for years, but it is critical. And you have our commitment that we will push whatever way we can as individuals to say, get out, find out who says what. Do they mean it? Are they going to keep their promises and vote for those people, please? And we'll work with whoever gets elected, because we're mainly non-political around the state.
Joyce?
Yeah, just quickly, I agree with you, Daryl, that we need to hold our politicians' feet to the fire and get them to actually come through with the promises that they have been making for at least 30 years, both federally and provincially. But I have to say that we need to start somewhere, and a little could go a long way. By hook or by crook, the nonprofit agencies within this town have held up childcare for the last 50 years that I've been involved in it. And so it won't take much for us to continue to improve that service. Ideally, we want to look toward a vision that will get us to a better place. But in the meantime, we could lose what we have if we don't have some sense of commitment to at least chug away, chip away, contribute what we can and keep it going, because that's been the nature of childcare, unfortunately, is just to haywire together and by hook or by crook try and get through the next year, the next month. Anyway, I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion around this table about both early learning and also out of school, in and out of school care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and so now we have another presentation, now by Dave Harper, President of the CRDTA.
Where am I going?
Well, come on over here.
Yeah, I think that might help.
Do you want some water?
Thank you. So, this is my second go around as local president here. I'm also a parent. I'm also a grandfather. I have a grandson of grade 3. And I decided that this year was the year the FSA is going to die. Anybody who knows me, that when I put my mind to it, knows that I deliver. You may have noticed the FSA got postponed. How do you think that happened? I was part of it. Now, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just asking you to do what Qualicum did and get out ahead of this. Be smart. Be on the right side of history here. You need to come out and say, the FSA, it's been postponed, it should just be canceled for this year. This makes no sense whatsoever in this pandemic era to be engaging in this idiocy. None. Zero. Just to elucidate a little bit for trustees who may not be aware of the history of the FSA. The FSA was brought in after something called PLAP. Yeah, I see the chair shaking. Yeah, he remembers the PLAP. And the FSA, three-letter acronym replaced the four-letter acronym PLAP. And it's been going a long time now. And let me tell you, when I'm pumping gas with my buddy Thomas there, shift supervisor, I told him what I was doing tonight, and he laughed. He said, "Oh yeah, what a waste of time." Nobody's going to their tombstone and saying, "Scribe on it, boy, am I glad I wrote the FSA." Think about it, okay? This is a test that supposedly doesn't count for kids' marks for what they're doing at school. It doesn't, and it can. So who does it count for? We're subsidizing a giant rating mechanism for the Fraser Institute. They pay no money to get all that data. Principals spend all that time calling parents and saying, "No, your child can't opt out. You'll have to come in and see me." Guess what? I went in grade 4 for Alan. I went in grade 7 for Alan. He didn't opt out. He was excused. I know what to say. And this year, because I know when the date is, it's January 18th. Is the media here?
They listen in.
Oh, they listen in.
Yeah.
This year, it's January 18th. I'm going to provide the media with an op-ed piece on what parents need to say in order for the principal to cave and go, "Your kid's not right." Because I've had it. This FSA is garbage. It's got to go. And it's definitely got to go this year. The last thing your principals and vice principals need in this year is to have a big time-wasting scenario of parents sending in a letter saying they want out, and then them being told they're not. Anybody who here is a parent, like, really? You want to live in a society where government tells you you must write a test that doesn't count, except that it does count for the Fraser Institute, who then passes off the data to the BC Realtors Association and proudly trumpets that, "Oh yeah, and this is in the neighborhood where the school that scored 6. Is that what this is all about? Really? I hope some of you are squirming right now. Really, you should be, as trustees. Because the Qualicum trustees, they took a stand. What I'm asking you to do is be on the right side of history here and take a stand. Now, it doesn't mean the ministry will listen to you. Okay? They may not, but you know what? We got it postponed, and we're going to keep plugging at this. And I'm absolutely unrelenting on this matter this year. I will do everything in my power to make sure that every single student in this district is not right, because they will be excused by their principal. And I'm not going to tell you what you need to say, because that would be giving it away. That's all I got to say.
Is that your phone? Your phone?
No, it's not my phone. Must be Barb.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Dave Harper.
You got any questions, feel free, otherwise I'll just get on out.
Are there any questions for Dave tonight about the FSA?
Quick one.
Okay.
Who's we?
Hmm?
Who is we?
That's for me to know and you to find out, John.
Well, that's the purpose of asking questions.
Yeah, I'll tell you if you really want to know.
Well, the reason I asked the question is because I wanted
I'll
to
tell you.
know.
I'll tell you. I'm on 4 different Facebook groups with parents who want to know how to kill this thing this year. And I'm telling them the magic phrases. I'm telling them how to do it. Okay? We've had it. Parents have had it. Okay? I'm not having my grandson run. This is ridiculous. 18 years now, 19 years. This has been going on and on and on. Endless cycle of, I don't want my child to write it. And then the principals are directed through the ministry, through the superintendent, that they have to send back the email saying, no, they must write it unless they have a medical condition or this, that, or the other thing. And then even when you do say you have that, they still say they have to write it. And then when they're absent, then the poor EAs have to pull all these kids and try and walk them all through it and get all caught up. It takes up 2.5 weeks of public schooling, the FSA. I see the board chair nodding. He knows, he's been there.
Takes a while.
Right? So in an era where we're already, you know, having our time cramped a little bit in public schools with hand washing and all the rest of it, it's, you know, necessary, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be. Why not take something off teachers and kids' plates that is totally superfluous to the pursuit of true education?
A little more than I asked for, but thank you.
I said I'd keep it to myself, but you insisted. So.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're going to move on now. There are no educational submissions. So now we're moving on to the presentation of audited financial statements for the year ending June 30, 2020. Graham Roberts.
So while we're waiting to get started, I'll just introduce myself to the board. So I've been involved in the school district audit for 4 years now. So I've been with the MNP that sort of period of time. Prior to that, I was actually worked within school districts. I was a assistant secretary treasurer for the Qualicum School District, and also assistant secretary treasurer and for a little bit secretary treasurer for the Nanaimo School District. So I'm very well versed of the issues that the board faces.
Okay, Graham, we're ready to go.
Great. So let's just, I'll go through this fairly high level for the board because the Secretary Treasurer's also got his discussion analysis after this, so I don't want to talk about the same thing a second time. So let's just jump into the audit report, because when we're doing our audit, this is basically the piece of paper that we produce. Everything else is done by Kevin and his team with some assistance and all that through the ministry setting up the templates. So let's actually just look at the audit report actually. So the audit report, so as I said, this is what we report on. So it's an independent audit report. So the school district has a disclosed basis of accounting. So that's why it's different than a traditional business, because we're reporting on the framework based on section 23.1 of the Budget Transparency and Accountability Act. So what that actually means on the statement of financial position, you have something that's called a deferred capital revenue. Proper accounting for that amount would not be setting that up as a liability. When those funds received from the ministry for capital projects, we bring those into revenue when we completed the project. So that's a deviation from standard accounting policy. So it's just putting these statements are results of operations are in compliance with in all material aspects of the financial reporting framework. Emphasis of matter, again, that's disclosing the accounting standard that's being used. A new thing that we haven't had in the past is this other information paragraph. So it refers to the schedules at the back of the statements which are not audited, because we've audited the sort of combined statements up front. And also it refers to the financial statement discussion and analysis done by the Secretary Treasurer as well. So we not part of the audit, but we reviewed it, and if there's anything that we didn't think was that collaborated within our financial statements, would let the board know, and we have nothing to report in that regard. So that is the audit report. So let's jump to statement 1. So statement 1, you can see cash is down 1.7 million this year from prior years. A big chunk of that is increase in receivables at year end, bit of a timing issue. So no collection issues noted during our auditing procedures. Accounts payable, slight increase in there as well. And again, that was some extensions given for some remittances by the government. So again, just a timing thing. Deferred revenue. So that's the unearned revenue. So that is your international program primarily. So the impact of COVID, we weren't getting prepayments for the 2021 school year. So that's a reduction there. Deferred revenue, so that's all the funds that are in special purpose. So it's a combination of ministry funded programs and some school generated funds as well. The big reduction there is last year you had a carry forward of AFG funding that rolled forward into the current year, so, which was spent. So sort of a double up in spending in AFG for the 2020 school year. For capital revenue, talked about what that is. So that's capital funding that the school district has received from the ministry. So it's set up as a liability on the financial statements, and it is amortized over the life of the asset that that funded the asset purchase. So net debt, you can see there's very little change from last year to this year, so it's kind of status quo in that sense. And you can see accumulated surplus at the bottom there decreased. I'll talk about the accumulated surplus a little bit later on. So let's jump to statement 2. So you can, when you look at, so revenues are up from prior years and also exceeded budget a little bit. So that is always good. Expenditures greater than last year. Primarily driver there is wage costs but less than budget. So you can see that at the end of the year, on sort of a combined operational basis, there's a deficit of the current year of $750,000, which is actually a planned deficit, because when you look at the budget calling, you can see that there's actually a planned deficit of $2.7 million. So the financial position is actually stronger than what was actually planned. So there is no statement 3. So statement 3 is it's a accounting nerd thing that if you have these weird derivative financial instruments, you'd have this remeasurement gains and losses. So the school district doesn't have any financial instruments like that. So that statement does not exist in these statements. So the statement of change in net debt shows that there's very little change in your total net assets less your net liabilities. So I want to actually jump all the way to Schedule 1. So I think it's page 30. So yeah, no, Schedule 1, please. There we go. So this just shows very high level the difference between your operating fund, special purpose, and capital. So you can see the net change in the year for the operating fund was a reduction of $590,000, and local capital is also reduction. So that's the total loss of the $750,000 right there. You can see here, and I'll talk about this a few different times, is also interfund transfers. So the first one is tangible capital assets purchased. So these are assets that have been purchased within the operating fund, but for accounting purposes, because they're a capital asset, we actually move that capital asset into the capital fund. And the next one is a local capital transfer. So this is planned purchases that are going to be made out of local capital. So it's an actual just a cash transfer over into local capital for future capital purchases. Then the other transfer is payment for some capital leases that the school district still has. So let's look at Schedule 2 now. So within the statement of operations, you can see that the revenue was actually higher than budgeted and also higher than last year. That was due to some additional funding that came in through the year. Expenditures were actually less than budgeted, so we actually ended the year in a better financial position than anticipated, than budgeted. Then you can see below that, those transfers that we just walked through again, and coming up with the deficit of $590,000 within the local capital, or within the operating fund. So this is a good, so you can see there's two numbers at the bottom of that schedule. There's internally restricted surplus. So these amounts are benchmarked for certain things, primarily for the current school year. So that's $3,792,000. Then there's the unrestricted surplus as well. So that's actually jumped to note 9, and that will sort of walk through what those surpluses are in a little more detail. So you can see, like, if you look at the surplus, you can see last year there's a surplus. The first line item is reserves from the prior years to balance the current year budget. So last year you had 533,000 sort of was brought forward to balance the budget, and that surprisingly is kind of what the operating loss is for the current year. So you can see that when you fast the budget for the current school year, you used $838,000 to balance the budget. Then you had some residual funding left over from the international program, then some plan and school supplies, and some planned spend for some VoIP telephone replacement, and some other stuff that's been set aside for future purchases. So you can see that comes to $2.6 million of earmark reserves, and then just a general operating reserve is added on top of that. So that gives you a total internally restricted reserve of just under $3.8 million, and sort of an unencumbered equity left within the school district is just over $2 million. So that represents about less than 2 weeks of your operations, just because, you know, it's a big number, but when you scale it down and look at your operational costs, it's just over, actually just less than 2 weeks. It's about just under 3%. And the unrestricted reserve, again, is reduced by that $800,000 approximately, which is kind of what you've earmarked to balance the current year's budget. Then the next note, while we're looking at the notes I want to bring to the board's attention, is note 13, which is the interfund transfers. And this is the third time that I brought it to the board's attention. So when the statements get approved, you're also approving this transfer. So again, the $673,000 is a transfer from the operations into local capital to fund future capital purchases. And then the 324 was actual purchases that was paid for with the operating funds, but because they're capital, we're transferring them into the capital fund. Then the almost $23,000 is for the capital leases. Then the last thing to sort of tie it all up is to actually look at the capital. So that's Schedule 4. So your investment in capital assets, let's try and explain that, is basically the accounting cost of the assets you have, less the accumulated amortization of those assets, less the deferred capital contributions that haven't been amortized against those. So that's sort of the equity, yeah, so it's the equity that you have in the assets that the school district has. So it's all book cost. It doesn't have anything to do with fair value cost of what those assets may be. So local capital, this is where the board has some authority to spend the money on capital projects. So again, you can see those transfers that we've talked about midway down the line. You can see this 673 coming in, and also the lease payments of 23,000. And you can see the other transfers of actual capital purchases within the local capital in the current year. So just $1 million of purchases made out of local capital. So you can see actually local capital, even with those transfers over, was reduced in the current year by $454,000. And so you can see the local capitals at the end of the year ends up with $605,000. So that's my quick high-level overview for the board. Open for any questions you may have.
Any questions? Yeah.
No questions. I just want to thank Graham and the auditors who came in right in the middle of the pandemic. I think we were the first on-site audit that they've done, and they were full of our workplace COVID safety policies. Yeah. And yeah, they did a great job looking at our district for the audit this week.
Awesome.
In previous statements, there's always been a statement, I didn't see it here, maybe I just missed it, but there's a statement saying in letters of really,
management findings. Yes.
yeah. Is that in this package? Because I didn't find it.
We didn't have any management findings in the current year.
Because sometimes I've seen a letter said that there were none.
Yeah. So
There were none yet.
Okay.
Here says there were none, and that is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just wondering where it was because I didn't see it. Thanks.
Yeah.
So now motion.
Yeah, so I guess what we're looking for is a motion from the audit committee to the board on whether to accept or reject the financial statements, the transfers.
So I'd like to thank Kevin for preparing these financial statements on a solo basis without the assistance of an assistant secretary treasurer. When I spoke with the auditors at the past meeting, they did say that Kevin did a good job, but he really was under the pressure to get this done. So thank you again, Kevin. I know it's been a rough summer for you. So I'd like to put forward a motion that the audited financial statements for the term ending June 30th, 2020, which includes the reserve transfers, which Graham had gone over, be adopted as presented by Auditor Graham Roberts from the firm of M&P LLP.
And I. Any question of the
What's the work that was going on? Lost the secretary and treasurer. I
Okay. Trustee Eddie, final statement?
Once again, I just would like to, I would like to thank Kevin for all of his hard work this summer. And our auditors for being forthright in helping me understand what things, the things in the financial statements that I had questions about. They were very patient. They explained to me amortization, and I really appreciate their work with me. Thank you.
Awesome. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And motion is carried.
Okay, so that's all that we need you for. Graham, thank you for hanging out with us for an hour on your Tuesday night.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy.
Take care.
Okay, so next on the agenda is the financial statement discussion and analysis as at June 30. Kevin Patrick.
Yeah, so Graham, he does a pretty thorough job of covering some of the financial highlights. So the financial statement discussion and analysis in a written form, many people looking at the statements may not have the opportunity to get a presentation from our auditor or from myself. So we do the financial statement discussion and analysis to just kind of point out some of really what Graham covered, but also it does go into a bit more detail. We won't go into that quite that level of detail, but I'll kind of hit on some things that he didn't touch on that I think are important. So one of the ones is there was a substantial difference between the budget amount and the actual amount, and that was because the CUPE wage settlement was incorporated into the budget because we had it at the time. The teacher settlement came after, so revenues were above budget, but expenses were also above budget. Those basically matched. So although it's a variance, significant variance, they did offset each other. With the financial performance, as you saw from the prior year, 533 to 590, that actually was fairly close, but it was an interesting year. So we obviously were impacted by COVID and had some shutdowns. We had a lot of extra costs. We had a lot of extra cleaning costs and labor costs in the amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars, like $200,000. We had reductions in revenues or interest income, which surprised me by how much, but when it goes from 3% to 1.5, there's a 50% reduction, which is $100,000. We had a reduction in that. We've started to see the reduction in international last year. Just a little bit, because we have a policy of not providing refunds once they've committed. So we did have a little bit of a reduction. But then we also did have some savings. Now this savings only impacted last year because when everybody was at home, staff were getting paid. However, we didn't have sick replacement coverage. That savings in itself really is the reason why we came just about equal. Overall, within the COVID costs and savings, we did see a little bit of savings. But as you notice, the deficit has stayed the same. And the big reason for that was on our maintenance side. We had an abnormally bad year for buses and bus repairs. And we based like $150,000, $200,000 over the budget cost for bus repairs. These bills are like $20,000 every bill. And I'll point out that that has been addressed because the last capital plan that we had, we were approved for 5 buses. When we can get those buses here, we're looking to see that cost overage for the transportation repairs go down. So so those were some concerns that we had out of last year, but overall, it really kind of came in almost as planned. As Graham did mention, our annual facility grant spending, we actually had a doubling up of years and we borrowed a little bit. So our normal annual facility grant spends about $1 million, 1.2. This past year, we had a program that was about $1.8 million. So a lot got done. It won't be sustained in the future. Again, we did actually borrow a bit from this next year, so we'll see a reduction there. On the
capital, we did have an active program which you can read about. I think the one thing I kept coming to that was just a really nice surprise last year was the BCA Sayward Playground. Like, what a nice community effort to get it. Wonderful addition to the school district. The total cost, $117,000 is what their donated value was. And like, even when I had to ask for the bill, like 6 months after it had been done, they were right on it. Like, a really nice, nice partner or donor, benefactor for the school district. Our school playground that we provided or that we received funding for, we ended up spending about $110,000. So, it definitely wasn't a cheap playground. It was consistent with the quality of the equipment that we would install ourselves, and anything a little bit better. Again, lots of good details if you're ever interested. At some point in time, we may get it into an infographic, but it's really tight timeline from the end of the financial statements to get this done, and it usually happens as school startup is. So we will get there. Now, our school expansion, so that local capital dropped from $1 million down to $650,000. The reason it was $1 million is the board had set aside school expansion capital. So that was for portables and conversion of classrooms. The good news is the board still has $650,000 in local capital, but for the appropriations, as we went through earlier today, the board, we haven't set anything additional aside for school expansion. So if we do need, we'll have to come and get approval from the board for use of local capital, but there's only $650 in there, and a portable, we've actually found a cheaper portable, but still $300,000 rather than $350,000. So that is potential concern. One other thing I just want to point out too, with you look deep and way back in the back page, when there's opportunities for rebates, grants, whatever, we always will. Part of our $1.8 million AFG plan was supported by $41,000 in Fortis Energy rebate grants. So it's little in the grand context, but it makes a difference, and it's good of staff and nice of staff to pursue and not just rush past it. Now, factors bearing on the school district's future. This is probably the most significant piece. So from when I prepared this to today, COVID is still the single biggest impact of what we're facing in the year going forward. At the end of last year, with school out, we had a savings. The increased costs we can cover. Going forward, we have lots of increased costs, and unfortunately, as these numbers are kind of coming in, it looks like our numbers are going to be down significantly overall, despite everything we've done to try to retain students. So we're probably in funding protection in this upcoming year for $1 million. Now, we received $1.9 million in federal grants. We received $460,000 in provincial grants. Those, as you'll see, are used up. In addition to those, my rough calculation is we're possibly facing another $1 million in increased costs from the sick replacement costs that Superintendent Morrow spoke to earlier. Where did my calculation go? Yeah, it's so international program has really come to very little students. There will be an extra cost. We'll likely use the appropriation. The sick costs are going up. We're going to see reductions in revenues, grants. So right now there's still a bit of a risk. Really, our surplus, unrestricted surplus, is $2 million, and I just have mentioned as a rough calculation about $2 million. So obviously, we'll try to work that down. I hope to bring a more detailed report for the board, but it kind of points out that right now, the COVID is a big risk. The funding piece, I'm hoping that the ministry will be able to address that. We've received no commitments from them so far. We'll contact them to let them know what state we're in, and there's some things I hope they can do, but we don't know at this point if they'll do it. So great news is the board's in a good financial position to maybe have not a lot of options, but some options going forward. But yeah, as hopeful as it was for this year coming up, with growth, it's not looking great. So so that's the financial statement discussion and analysis. I do have another report later that we'll talk about from the federal grants. So the financial statements were a big positive bang, and the upcoming year we will have some challenges.
Any questions from trustees? Susan?
Yeah, Kevin, I'm not surprised to hear this, I'm sorry, but I'm wondering, in your network of fellow secretary treasurers around the province, would this not be a typical situation for most districts at this point?
It all depends, and I'll point out when we look at the federal grants, but it depends. Like, there are some school districts that are down on a percentage-wise more than us, so they'll be in a similar situation. There's some districts that haven't experienced the same declines. Their districts are growing and they'll end up flat or equal. I know that the international program decline for some metro districts has been a huge negative impact. So yeah, we're all facing varying degrees. Like, the international news for some people was known earlier late last school year, but earlier than us. So they may be a bit more advanced, but it is having its big impact. The ministry is aware that there's impacts. I don't know if they know exactly who and how many. So we'll share that information and see if we can trigger some sort of consideration.
Okay, let's move on. Making notice of motion to revise our policy to allow for the election of the chair and vice chair at the first meeting in November rather than December, because the elections, municipal elections, were in October. So I will have finished my 2 years in November, and so that's basically housekeeping. And we will move forward with that motion at our next meeting. But the pieces that are changing are there. They're highlighted in the documents that you have, so you can look at those and double check and make sure that these make sense to you. Okay, on to the next one. Request for report on costs and benefits that belong to BCSTA. I would like to, I have a motion here and I would look for a move and seconder. These are very tight financial times, and we need to make sure that we're getting value for our money. And when it comes to, for example, the costs, what I would be looking for, well, what are the costs in an average year? Let's say, for example, 2019. What are the fees? What are the total travel costs? That sort of thing. In terms of the benefits, the benefits would be if the district administration receives any benefits from our membership in the BCSTA. And in terms of benefits to individual trustees and to our students reflected through our membership, that's really up to the individual trustee to think about how much benefit have you received as a trustee by being a member of the BCSTA and the BISCA. That would be a decision that each of you makes. I think we need to, it's prudent with this taxpayers' money, and we should be looking at this from time to time, say, is this valuable? That is sort of the first step that I think a board should take in making a conscious decision whether to continue membership in an organization. If it's an organization that doesn't represent us or does not provide us with value, then we should reconsider our membership. But at this point, I'm just asking for a motion to Secretary Treasurer to give us a report on the costs and benefits of belonging to the BCSTA. Do I hear a mover?
Sure.
Moved John Kerr, seconded Darrell Hagan. Any discussion? Susan?
I think in most times it is valuable to do a review of how money is spent. I wonder if this is the time to put an extra request on our Secretary Treasurer and his department for an issue that could be postponed. We have not done a review of this ever, in my knowledge, and I just question whether it's timely to do it now.
Actually, we have done it in the past, and some time ago I made a motion that we withdrew from the association because there was a debate on the budget. The budget just kept on going up and up and up, and I'm not sure what the status of that is anymore, whether or not that's paid for by the government for us to belong, or whether or not it comes out of our individual. These are the things I would like to know by this request. We were in the middle of a discussion at one point, and somebody just turned to me and said, "Shut up, Darrell. Vote on the issue here." And I thought, well, you know, if you can't say we have to keep our costs down because we're laying off people in my district, you know, I couldn't handle that. And recently, I've heard the ministry make several announcements, you know, of all the people they've discussed things with, but it wasn't our association. There was like 15 people that they said that they had talked with. Our association didn't play a role in that. And when our superintendent made a submission from various groups, trustees included them that the government wanted back. I don't, or was it the BC school? Where's the leadership right now in an organization we need to be stepping forward? And that was just my question. Whether it's timely or not, we need leadership, and maybe this just a brief update of where the money's coming from, where it's being spent, if it doesn't take too much time, would be appropriate to give them a wake-up call to say, you know, if you're not representing us and our viewpoints, then why are we belonging to an organization that isn't speaking for us, especially locally here?
Okay.
I just want to ask for clarification. I can definitely gather the costs.
Yep.
The benefits, though, I think they might be more on a trustee level about those benefits. Are you okay if I gather the costs?
Yeah, the costs would be fine.
Okay.
You know, if for example, you're getting legal help from BCSTA, that would be a thing.
Yeah.
You know, other than that, personally, I find the BCSTA is not representing my views very well, and I really question the value of being a part of that organization. But I need to see the costs. I think it's something that it's part of our oversight. Joyce?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile considering it in a fresh way, because it seems to me that the last 2 years our relationship with BCSTA has shifted.
Yes.
I hear BCSTA making news releases on behalf of the trustees of British Columbia, and I don't know, nobody asked me which trustees are they talking for. So I feel that the discussion needs to include some perspective on what BCST could be and what BCST currently appears to be, and whether that's the nature of the situation we're in terms of the pandemic, or whether that is inherent in the leadership we have now that is, you know, we have only just had this president for 2 years. That I think that's all part of the discussion.
Trustee Burke?
I guess I have two concerns. The first concern is quite specific, and it goes to something that you said. And I was quite surprised when the minister announced the school reopening, and the BCSTA president was at the meeting and did speak to the, you know, with BCSTA support of school opening, and yet our chair did not have any contact. None of the individual trustees had any contact with the BCSTA. I don't know that whoever else did. The second thing is that my concern is that I feel that from what I've seen, and it's my perspective, is that the BCSTA seems to have become a little very cozy with the ministry and almost is becoming a spokesperson for the ministry rather than a representative and an advocate for school boards around the province, and bringing our concerns to the minister. It seems to me that we're getting stuff back from the ministry through our executive, mainly our president. So, yeah, I think that this review is really something that we need to have a discussion about.
Okay, everybody's had a chance to speak on the matter. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
I'd like to abstain.
And one abstention, and the motion is carried. Okay, so now you see where we are. Got lots of papers.
Student input. Please, next one.
Lost my second page of my agenda.
It's number F,
School
student
restart.
input
Yeah,
to-
student input.
School restart, okay.
Student input.
Oh, F.
Oh, student input,
Yeah.
sorry.
Right, sorry. If I could speak to this.
Yes, please.
Yes, Richard, a while ago, I know you started reaching out to leadership groups within our schools, and I thought that was a noble ambition. You said, Daryl, you know, if you want, you go to it. So I have approached a couple of principals in high schools, or vice principals, and I'm trying to get some feedback. And I would also like to have some student feedback as well. I don't know how I'm going to be approaching that, but I would hope that my email is known and that if they have ideas. What I'm finding right now is that we need input from students, how they're finding things in the classroom, and at times we want to ask them questions for information. And I think it's really important that they become part of the conversation at a board level, that we can have discussions about the people we're delivering service to. And so that's my main interest. I just thought I'd let you know that that's what I've undertaken at your request. I have a number of little comments I would really like to make is some recognition to the bus drivers. In fact, you know, I was thinking about that the other day. You know, they're the first ones to greet those little kids as in the morning. And I told you last time that I watched a group of parents herding this whole group of kids that were getting on the bus one by one, and everyone, I believe, had a mask on, but the first person they see from the school district are those bus drivers. And they're greeted with smiles and joy, and what was really humorous is as the last little child got on the bus, the parents turned around and walked away, and there was this sigh of relief and there was this sigh of joy that they're handing off their children to somebody who cares. And that's the message that I love to hear, is that parents feel right from the beginning and the get-go. And during the summertime, they were driving around with food, and they were driving and helping out, and you know, they've adjusted to working as cleaners as well. And I think it's just fantastic that we have that relationship. And you brought up the fact that payroll, that was National Payroll Day, and you know, having worked for the government for 30 years, if you want to mess up the payroll, you've messed up everything. I mean, we saw that federally. We saw people who were unwilling to drive boats for the Coast Guard, and you know, their paychecks were coming 6 months late. I am glad that we have such a great team, a great leader in this area, and the people who are working in payroll, you don't think of them very often, but I think we should say thank you for all the work you're doing behind the scenes. And like you say, if that paycheck comes and it's wrong right away, everything's wrong with the whole system. And I think they're doing a great job down there. I had several other things. I'm going to leave it because of time, but thank you.
Thanks, Darrell. Thanks for putting some thought into the student leadership idea. I know that Jeremy has worked on that file too, and I think by the time, hopefully by the time this board finishes its 4 years, that we'll have a more formalized way of getting student input into the board. So thanks for running point on that, and appreciate that. And so now we're going to turn over to Dr. Morrow to talk about how the school restart has gone.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Franklin. This will be a joint presentation with Associate Superintendent Kyle. We'll be talking about a quick update on eBlend music program and coordinators, and as well French Immersion. So we will have a more thorough presentation around some of those pieces at our next board meeting. We were aware with the number of presentations that we would need to keep this very brief. So yeah, I really would start by just sharing that we've had a fairly successful school startup, and I think the credit to that startup goes to our support staff and our teachers and our principals and vice principals who are on the front line of getting schools ready. This was an unprecedented, incredibly complex and very unique September, and full credit goes to the adaptation, the flexibility, and the commitment and dedication of our educational staff. It's tremendous asks that we've asked for from all of our staff, and they've responded brilliantly on behalf of the kids in their care. I'd like to just provide a quick update to the board around enrollment. At this time, we have just under 11% of School District 72 students who have chosen eBlend this year. When you put that into perspective, that's right now we have 571 students in eBlend. So I think last year we had 46, so you can imagine the complexity of the adaptation and changes that we've needed to make around staffing. I want to also express appreciation for our parents' patience as we have had to make significant adjustments to hire and expand the eBlend program. At this point, with this being our first September with our new student information system, MyNBC, and in the midst of the many changes as a result of shifting student enrollment to eBlend, we have not yet got solid enrollment numbers. So I'm going to provide the board with an estimate, and at this point, we're estimating that we will likely be over 100 students less than our spring projections. And so while this remains an estimate, and we are hopeful that if this number is accurate, it will not necessarily have the same budget reduction that we would have in a typical year. And Kevin's already talked a little bit about needing to determine what the provincial landscape is before we can determine what the impact will be. So I just wanted to commit to the board that we will have accurate numbers for our next board meeting, as well as the impacts of what our actual numbers are. And again, I mentioned this in my opening comments, but I'm grateful to report to the board and to the public tonight that we've had no cases of COVID in our schools, and that is a reflection of what's happening in our community. And it is a reminder that we do need to continue to take steps that help protect our students and our staff. I'm just going to turn it over to Associate Kyle to provide an update again on eBlend music programs, teacher coordinators, and our French Immersion eBlend program.
Good evening, everybody. I'll start with the eBlend and eBOS, and Dr. Moreau has already brought up a few of the pieces. We've got 571 students in eBlend. That includes K-12. It also includes our French Immersion students at the elementary, middle, and secondary. There have been challenges in terms of finding those teachers, so we've used federal funds, and I know Kevin will speak to that down the road, but we have increased staffing in approximate 12 to 13 teachers to deal with those students in eBlend and eBOS. At this point, all families should have been contacted by a teacher to start discussing their learning plans. Our teachers that are doing eBlend are collaborating and looking at best practice on how to do this. They're sharing resources, ideas. This could not have happened without Kai Taylor and his team. He has worked tirelessly getting Moodles together that have a lot of the grades and courses, which are great resources for our students to use. There will be some challenges we're anticipating with some of our high school students. They are to complete the eBOS courses in the 5 weeks, and there's going to be some exceptions in that for those struggling students and those that need a bit of time, but it will be some challenging times as students don't finish in that time frame. But we're working with counselors. Those students are still connected to their schools, both in elementary, middle, and secondary. So LST support, youth care worker support, and counselors will still be available for all those students. So, you know, all in all, when you have 571 students, which is significantly higher than any other year, I think we've got a pretty good start. But we've got some really committed teachers and Kai Taylor and his team getting that ready to go. I'll move on to music, and it's really positive in terms of the commitment of school administrators to make timetables work and schedules work, and for those teachers involved in the music programs. It's highly valued in any year, and that value and that commitment to music and providing that to students has continued even in these more challenging times. It does look different from school to school, but the music teachers are being incredibly adaptable and innovative in their approaches to keep music front and center for our students. So some of the strategies that have been employed throughout the different schools is like dots on floors to ensure that there's physically distancing that can be maintained if there's any singing going on. Choirs have been reduced in a lot of the schools, but some are able to do that, and that's simply because administrators have been able to make those timetables work so that there's smaller numbers of cohorts. Any instruments that are given to students are personalized for those individual students. Scheduling has been innovative to, again, limit those number of cohorts that interact. So, you know, for instance, in some school, they're going to do music for half the year, and then the other half will be PE, so they'll flip-flop. We have some teachers that have developed hundreds of individual music kits for each student that comes to their music program. Some schools have replaced choir with handbell choirs, so that's going to be exciting to see that or hear that, I guess. There is still lots of uncertainty as any kind of performance as we go into the year, but that's for another time. Both high schools have linear band or jazz bands, but are teaching half the group, and they've also put on covers onto the horn instruments to obviously reduce or eliminate any spit that would go past. Some schools are having music teachers move from classroom to classroom versus the students coming to the music room. And Southgate was able to accommodate all students who requested band, and Phoenix for the first time, which is, you know, again, people are just thinking so creatively. All grade 6 and 7 students and grade 8 French Immersion students will have an expo of music education for the first time. Unfortunately, there won't be band 8 at Phoenix. Again, some challenges around scheduling. So when you talk about music in our district, just the innovation and commitment by all those folks to make that work for kids and that still being a priority. I'll just quickly go through French Immersion. With Ecole will appoint and Ecole or EDM is we have an E-blend number of 28. We have a French Immersion teacher that's new to our district that has taken those students on an E-blend and really working on how do we develop language remotely. Obviously, language-based courses are more challenging to do, but he's working well with that. And we will, as Jeremy had talked about earlier, we've got our district French coordinator coming back about mid-November that'll really be able to dig in and help with that. Phoenix has 14 French Immersion. We collapsed the French Immersion 8 division, and that French Immersion teacher is taking on those students. And Kerry High has 6 French Immersion. So, the numbers are low, but there's still a strong commitment to make sure that we're trying to develop the language remotely while taking care of their academics. The last piece to speak about is our coordinators, and those that have been in the board office can attest to sort of the buzz of activity that goes on in our coordinators' offices. And lots of collaborating and alignment with what they're doing so that they're not working in silos, and all of it is where does that fit in our strategic plan, and that's really promising when we're hearing them speak about that in the language that is about learning and alignment, and strategic plan is part of all of those conversations. So they're developing tools to gather meaningful data in each of their areas. Their focus is really at this point getting a culture and climate of the district, understanding it, doing and assessing where are we at as a teaching profession, as an educational profession in schools, the history of the district, the visions, the structures, the practices, and with that, understanding that, then moving into, and many are already there, the scope and sequence of assessment within schools, vertical alignment from elementary to middle to secondary, that there's the K to 12 view of what's going on. And who are our least successful students, and the focus of that conversation, how do we move them up in an equitable way? And asking questions to those in the schools about, what are you doing, why are you doing it, and who does it best serve? And those are those reflective questions that educators, we need to be asking ourselves all the time. But a lot of the feedback that we're getting from schools and the coordinators are getting is that teachers are really wanting this. The early adopters are, just saying, come to us. They are, we're not using the word initiative. It is not an initiative. It is a service and support to our educators in the schools. And so far they've been welcomed into schools, and our elementary literacy coordinators are collecting data, making it district-wide so that we can look at from district data. So all in all, with our coordinators, and they will present at a future board meeting, is already making an impact and an excitement in schools despite the situation we find ourselves in. So that's it in a nutshell, as quickly as I could possibly do it.
Thank you. And Trustee Hagan, you have a question?
Thanks for that report. As you know, I really support music in this district, and I have been asking around, what are we doing? I think it's interesting with the horns and all of those kinds of, it's nice to know we're moving forward with that. And French Immersion, I understand that there's not as much, how do I describe it, information that we can gather to use online as others normal English programs. So it's good to hear that we've got a full-time teacher working on that part. I have been by the board office quite a few times, and this is one of the most exciting group of people that I've seen, these teacher coordinators. Have you given any thought at all how we can perhaps integrate that with our teacher Pro-D program at all, and get it focused in the middle of all the change that we've been going through?
So we have posted a district core Pro-D coordinator to point 5. And the posting closed yesterday, so we'll be looking at applicants and looking to fill that position. The whole purpose for all of the coordinators, and I like your question, Daryl, is teachers value professional development, and they certainly have to have a voice, and that would be the core Pro-D committee. But you know, the hope is that they will see how it can be aligned with the work of the teacher coordinators, and align it with the desires of the professional learning needs or wants at schools. So that coordinator will be working closely with our district teacher coordinators and meeting with the core Pro-D committee, and seeing how we can align and use the expertise and experiences of our local district coordinators, and if we need to go outside of that as well. So that is the intent, is that there will be alignment with that.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you, Morgan, for your report. And we're going to move on to the Federal Safe Return to Class Fund. And Secretary Treasurer is going to be talking about that. You have in your binder there, you should have a sheet there where the budget has been worked out for that. Can you find that?
Yeah, so basically the last page and has sort of what the numbers are. It looks nicer on my screen here. I'm not sure why certain lines didn't show up on the printout. But so now this is, again, kind of just another part, or the next step in what I mentioned earlier about where we're headed for budget. So a week ago, knowing this meeting was coming up, and also considering the outdoor education request, the senior management team got together to kind of look at what we had committed to, and look like what other spending could look like as part of this federal Safe Return to School Fund. We knew, because we have committed to, we've got 14 sort of the DL positions, which are extra positions in the school district, new positions really to help give options for students, as well as it helps reduce some of the class size. That was the approach that we took. And so when you kind of factored that in, when we realized that we have 14 positions at $1.5 million commitment, so that, you know, quite quickly took a lot of what was available on the grant. So when we looked at other priority options, again, we did look at and consider strategic plan. We talked about strategic priorities, but really some of this grant is more meant to mitigate some of the impacts of COVID on the district. And there are some, there are obviously huge benefit to doing something like the DL positions that work in tandem with other, the setup of our school districts, the setup of our classrooms, and what we'd like to offer. We are lucky that we're able to offer distance learning by taking elements of our eLearn program and really just kind of expanding it. So, and the other item that we had already committed to at the beginning of the year with principals was this additional student supervisors. With the cohort rules, requirements, we're having students go out in different groups now throughout the day. And so we've had to expand the students. So there's just strange things like that that maybe I didn't think of until it kind of came up through associates, that, you know, this is something we should consider. So as you can see, we've penciled that in at 11 at 77,000. So in the report, you can see I did do some work on gathering information about outdoor education. There were some options, some nice structures. We have actually, Cortez has a really nice initiative that a proposal came from Klahoos Nation to partner to build a structure. So they have asked for some costs to be covered, which we would intend to cover this out of this. As other parts of the outdoor education, so there's outdoor classroom kits. We heard everything from concerns about if you build a structure outside, it might attract some unsafe people that in unsafe conditions that could impact students. We really kind of talked and had people consider temporary shelters as well, the pop-up tents, to see whether people could get out and use that. So the feedback kind of came back to support the most likely, which were some the pop-up tents, not quite as robust as what a nice permanent structure would be. Permanent structures using much lead, as I pointed out, probably $50,000 to $60,000 type item. However, I know we proposed this last week. We've also got IT staffing for all the extra DL and the technology home devices. Again, some of the parents, some of the families that chose the eBlend method don't have the technology to do that. So now we did have student devices that we bought last year, but they can only be used in a school classroom setting. So so we had budgeted stuff. I guess where I'm getting at with the uncommitted items, which is the outdoor education, the IT staffing, and the technology home devices, is we might want to consider using some of this money for the sick replacement costs. And when we sat and we planned this, we had every good intention of proceeding with some of these the requests from the board and some of these other initiatives. But I'm just kind of wondering, with how short our TOC lists were, we potentially could be doubling our sick replacement costs for this upcoming year. And so it'll have a pretty big impact. And I think Trustee Wilson asked, what are other districts doing? I'm wondering if this is the type of thing. When we received all these grants, we tried to use them and deliver them as exactly as what the intention was, which were all additional and new services. But there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's some risks of our core pieces possibly running into some challenges in this upcoming year. So I just, it's something I'll raise. We submit this to the federal government, or we submit it to the provincial government, I believe, in another 2 weeks. We'll try to find out more about our funding piece if we're short students, to see whether or not that would allow us to put some of this stuff in. But it's just a thought, just has come up today. I haven't even discussed it with SMT team because it just to allow some of that flexibility for the board.
Mr. McMahon?
Yes, I appreciate your attempt to include outdoor education in your budget. I'm wondering, I think it's something that I would like to see us not rush into. I think that there's an opportunity to explore the concept in a way that might very well be a conduit to some important conversations we could have with our Indigenous partners. I think that some years ago we had a presentation looking at what kind of structures they might like to see integrated into our school buildings in order that it could better represent a West Coast kind of cultural feel. So there may be some ideas, and there may be some support, and there may be some dollars that they could bring to the table for us to move forward on. And I think those are all conversations that could have some value in themselves, even if it doesn't come up with dollars.
Mr. Hagan?
Yes, when I made this motion, I was looking to help decompress the classrooms in a way that would be beneficial over a long term. How we do that, I would leave that to better minds than my own. I just am putting a proposal forward because I think learning outdoors in our environment, where we have the ocean, the mountains, and everything around us here, and the fact that we're talking about global warming, it would really, I think, draw us all closer to the land. If we're not if we're unprepared to move forwards on this at this time, that's fine, but I think we should give it really careful consideration that all our decisions are not around money, but we look forward. We look forward to our 3 goals in our strategic plan, and I do believe that outdoor education could fit within that quite easily. But again, it's not just my opinion, and if it's a lot of money right now and we're unsure of what's going on with everything else, well, why don't we wait until the dust settles down and then take another look at it? We'll have more time. I've been really popular lately. You should know that. It must have gone into the newspaper, and everyone who wants to sell something to do with outdoor education now has my email address. Of course, I didn't open any of them up because I think it's a school site, but anyways, that aside from it, this is not a personal issue of mine. I just think that it would be exciting if we can move down this and include the outcomes that we're looking for. If right now our distinct needs are in other places, well, let's spend it there. But I don't want to lose focus that, you know what, we can make a change in the middle of chaos that could last for a long, long time. And then when you look at our outlying areas, they're surrounded by nature. And if we can utilize it, even if it's just materials to use in the classroom to go outside in the beginning, you know, I'm not sure that a structure at the present time would be appropriate. So,
I get the sense you, are you suggesting you might want to withdraw that motion and maybe come back at it again, just even having people look at, I know it's difficult times right now with everything else, but perhaps sometime in the future, developing a rationale for outdoor education, and then I guess almost like a strategic plan for, like a mini strategic plan for it, going forward, you know, like as you've said, looking forward, and having something that people can work on and then buy into, and then take it from there when I don't know, as you said, when the dust settles.
I would be willing to withdraw my motion. That's not a problem. When we get money from the federal government, we can use it in a different way that can be a long-term benefit. I try to lean on it. And so, yes, I still want us to move forward in this area, but it's not my decision. It's a board decision. It's our senior management team and how we would like to do that. I think that's the way it should be. And if the board would like to reconsider this at a future time, we could maybe diarize it to, 4 months from now or something, and have a conversation around it. What should we do next? But I don't want to lose track of this, because I really think that we underutilize everything around us that we could be learning from.
Yeah, I think that the notion of spending money on buildings right now might be premature, but I wouldn't like to see the spark that you've created around further discussion and exploration and some brainstorming around how to move concepts of nature-based education forward. The idea of outdoor education is very complex. It's not, it needs some time to chew on it to see how we want to embed those kind of principles or those kind of visions within our strategic plan as it sits. And I would like to see those conversations start to percolate now, rather than putting them off to another time. We may not find actions that we want to take immediately, but we need the ideas to start now.
I just want to contribute too. I think that it would be helpful for the board to have staff present some of the exciting pieces that are taking place. And we have a number of staff who have committed and built in recent years school gardens that have students with hands in the ground. We have forest schools at some of our elementary schools where they learn Indigenous names for plants as they go into the forest on a consistent basis. We have outdoor ed elective programs at both middle and high schools, including a program that my son was fortunate enough to experience in grade 9 here at the school with teacher Lou Lakota, which was a grade 9 semester of outdoor education experiences, and he's quick to help me in the canoe to correct my stroke. So, so I think it would be exciting for the board to hear some of those initiatives, and I think to then consider and ponder some next steps.
I think that would be a good next step.
Yeah.
In my opening remarks, I talked about outdoor education and its importance. Being around for a long time, I can remember when every kid in grade 5 was given swimming lessons in this. And during the early restraint days, that was one of the first things that got cut. And, my career has been one of observing cuts to education, not just for 10 years, but for 25 and 30 years. We're surrounded by water, but our kids don't get swimming lessons. That was one of the first things to go a long time ago. I would like to see an education system that really capitalizes on outdoor education and the wonderful natural environment that we have here. And the board does own properties that we could use for outdoor education facilities. We need the financial support of the government to make that a reality. The other thing I talked about at first thing in my remarks was asking people to stay home when they're sick. I noticed one of our presenters was sick as a dog tonight. Stay home. Don't share your diseases with other people. And I'm really thinking that there will be additional costs to the board when people stay home when they're sick. But this year of all years, we need people to stay home when they're sick. So I do believe that we need to give the flexibility to our Secretary Treasurer and Superintendent and Senior Management team to use those federal funds to get us over this COVID-19 hump. And that the board needs to give them permission to manage those funds in a way that they see fit. But that moving forward, a report of where we are at now with outdoor education would be excellent. So I would hear a motion to withdraw the tabled motion. Moved Trustee Hagan, seconded Trustee and all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Okay.
Aye.
Wrong. And that brings us to,
Do you have something you want to say?
oh, I'm sorry, Susan.
Very briefly, just adding to what you were saying, John, about, pardon me. Thank you. It's getting late. The property that was identified on Quadra has Bay Road. We, at one point a couple of years ago, wanted to look at it more specifically as an outdoor education facility.
Yeah.
So that kind of fits with our 10-year facility plan too, and I think it's all part of that bigger conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is great.
Yeah. Okay, Trustee Hagan,
To move adjournment.
and we are adjourned.
Aye.